A man over 40 doesn't always lose the people in his life to divorce, distance, or drifting apart. Sometimes he removes them himself, on purpose, not by accident, not because he got unlucky, because one day he looks around and realizes some of them were only ever there because he kept covering the cost. And he's not particularly interested in explaining that decision to anyone who wasn't paying attention the first 10 times. You've probably seen the moment or lived it yourself. His phone lights up on the counter. He looks at the name, reads it the way you'd read a weather report, and keeps doing whatever he was already doing. 10 years ago, he'd have answered before the second ring, already rehearsing how he'd fix whatever was wrong on the other end, already rearranging his evening around someone else's emergency. Now, he just lets it ring out. No guilt sits in his chest afterward, no internal argument to win, just quiet and the strange, unfamiliar relief of not immediately becoming useful to somebody. This isn't who he's always been. For most of his adult life, he was the one everyone called first, the fixer, the guy who showed up at midnight without asking questions, who drove 2 hours because someone's car broke down, who kept the peace at every holiday dinner so nobody else had to carry it. He answered every call, absorbed every complaint, gave the same advice more times than he could count, and quietly told himself that being needed constantly was the same thing as being loved. For years, that math worked well enough that nobody ever thought to check it, including him. Something shifts for a lot of men once they cross into their 40s, and it isn't a personality transplant. Time stops feeling like an abstract idea and starts feeling like a number with an actual bottom to it. And once time feels limited, a man starts running the math on his own energy the way he used to run it on his bank account. Every relationship gets quietly audited, whether he means to or not. Some people clear the bar without even trying. Most just stop clearing it, not because they were ever bad, but because his peace has gotten expensive, and he's done covering the bill for people who never once reached for it. Some of this goes back further than 40. A lot of these men learned early, as kids, that being useful was safer than being honest, that showing up and fixing things kept the peace in a house where honesty didn't. That lesson doesn't disappear. It just waits quietly for decades until a man finally has enough distance from childhood to notice he's still running on it. A lot of it also traces back to how men are handed friendship in the first place. Most of his early connections were built around proximity and usefulness. Teammates, co-workers, the guys from the same job site or the same gym. Relationships that ran on shared context, instead of anything either side had to actually choose. Take away the job, the team, the daily overlap, and a surprising number of those bonds turn out to have had nothing underneath them at all. By his 40s, he's noticed which friendships survived the removal of convenience, and which ones quietly needed it the whole time to exist. None of this is happening to him for the first time either way. By 40, he's watched the same 3 or 4 people cycle through his life, wearing different names. The friend who only calls when he needs a favor and vanishes the second it's paid back. The relative who respects a boundary exactly once, right up until it's inconvenient for them. The guy who says, "You've changed," and really means, "You stopped being available to me on demand." The one who shows up to every celebration, but disappears the moment things get hard. He doesn't need one more data point to be sure. He's seen the pattern enough times that he's stopped waiting politely for the exception to show up. For 20 years, he built a version of himself that could carry anything. Steady, useful, unbothered. The guy other people leaned on without ever once asking if he had anything left to give that day. That version worked. It earned him respect, a reputation, a permanent seat at every table. There's a simple way to understand what happens when a man holds that same steady performance for 20 years straight. Role fatigue, not weakness, not bitterness, just the exhaustion of performing the same identity for too long. A man can't run a mask that heavy forever without the real face underneath starting to ache from holding a shape it never actually chose. Somewhere in his 40s, the performance gets too expensive to keep funding, and he quietly stops auditioning for a role he never wanted in the first place. Here's the part that's harder to sit with, though. Not every man doing this is doing it out of wisdom. Some of it really is fear, just wearing a more respectable name. A man who finally learned exactly which people deserve his time is not the same as a man who simply found a socially acceptable way to never risk being disappointed again. If every single person eventually gets cut, that's not selectivity. That's a wall with better branding, and walls don't ask who's actually safe before they go up. The honest question was never whether he's protecting his peace. It's whether anyone could still get close enough to actually threaten it. For the men where this is genuinely working, there's a difference you can see. And it isn't subtle. He isn't sitting alone in a quiet house hoping a phone will ring that isn't going to. That's loneliness, and it has a particular restless texture to it. What he has instead is quieter and heavier at the same time. A house that's silent, because he chose the silence, not because nobody wanted to fill it. He stopped treating access to his time and his attention like something people are automatically owed just for showing up in his life. His circle got smaller. From the outside, that reads as a failure, a warning sign, something to fix. It usually isn't. A small circle built on people who actually show up beats a crowded one built on people he's still quietly performing for. He didn't stop believing in connection. He just stopped confusing being needed with being loved. And he's in no hurry to go back to a version of himself that couldn't tell the two apart. Nobody throws him a parade for this. There's no version of he finally stopped answering everyone's calls that gets celebrated the way a promotion or a wedding does. It happens quietly, in 100 small refusals nobody else witnesses, and most of the men doing it don't fully realize what they've built until they notice how rare it's become to feel drained after spending time with someone. If you know a man who quietly got harder to reach after 40, or you've caught yourself becoming one, tell us in the comments what actually changed first. Was it one moment, or did it take years to notice? Subscribe to FinalSecond if you want more of the psychology people live every day but rarely hear said out loud.